Let's speak to Moazzam Begg, who's a British citizen who was held in Guantanamo Bay for more than 2 years. Moazzam, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What was your reaction when you heard this from President Obama today?
It's hard to fault anything that he said. I mean, he's saying all the right things, that it's against American values, it's against the rule of law, and it threatens their security. But the problem is he said this before. He said it in 2009 when he took office. As President of the United States of America, he signed an order to have Guantanamo closed. He then reaffirmed his commitment in 2012 and 13 at the height of the Guantanamo prisoner hunger strikes, where people were being force-fed. And then now again, crucially, he said that because he's no longer in the electoral race for the United States presidency, he feels that he can freely talk about this as a non-political issue and call for Guantanamo to be closed. The problem is that he's been blocked by Congress numerous times, almost every time. And the bigger problem than this is that despite the 35 prisoners who are already cleared for release, there are another bunch of people, approximately around 60 odd, who are not going to ever be charged with a crime because there's no evidence against them, and who the Americans deem too dangerous to be released. But the moment they're taken onto U.S. soil, which is the suggestion in Obama's plan to Congress, they will have to show evidence that was extracted through torture, through waterboarding, through beating, through rectal hydration, and everything that came out in last year's CIA torture Senate report. So the moment that happens, they'll have to the case will be thrown out of court, and these folk will have to be released. So they're in a predicament, and I don't know how he's going to get out of this one, even if he submits this report.
Yeah, as you point out, Congress will still be a significant stumbling block. People have already said, in fact, that even though he's made this televised address, and even though he's restated that he wants to try and close Guantanamo, that it may well be that Congress block it yet again.
Yeah, and he said that he's not electioneering this time. So, it's not that he said that it's not the sort of thing you want to talk about in an election year. So I doubt anybody else is going to talk about it. And Obama wants, I think, this to be part of his legacy, that he managed to follow through on one last attempt to close down the place that he said that he would when he first took power. And I think history might judge him to not have been able to follow through. And the other problem, of course, he says that this is a stain on the history of the United States of America, which most people would agree, that holding people without charge or trial for 14 years under torturous conditions is not what the world's most powerful and vociferous proponent of democracy should be doing.
I know you've spoken before, since you were released from there, about what it was like to be an inmate at Guantanamo. But for people who haven't heard your story, just remind us what your day-to-day life was like there, and why President Obama describes it in this way as a stain on America's history.
Well, he's known. I think he's heard the personal stories. I have to say, I feel almost unqualified now. I was in Guantanamo from 2002 to 2005. I just spent the weekend with Shakar Armour, who's a British resident, who spent 14 years in Guantanamo without charge or trial, and it's almost impossible to describe what that existence means. If you take the worst convicted prisoner who's convicted of mass murder or terrorism on the United States mainland or Britain, the Guantanamo prisoners don't have any of those rights, not rights of visitation, not rights of phone calls. They're constantly, I think, 23 hours lockup. They don't have access to news. They can't see their children that have been born. Shakar Armour, if you just take his case, he's got 4 children, all of whom don't know who their father is up until recently. The youngest was born while he was in Guantanamo and 14 years old. And this isn't a despotic third world developing nation. This is the United States of America that's doing this. That makes it even harder to fathom and to palate.
When Obama was speaking today, he made a point of naming those various terrorists, people like the shoe bomber Richard Reed, for example, who was tried and convicted and is now being held on US soil. He was basically saying, look, we don't need Guantanamo. We can deal with these people on our own soil. We can lock them up. We can find them guilty if the evidence is there.
America has, I think, one of the biggest track records of convictions per capita. So I think that there's no lack of prisons, and there's one of the largest prison populations in the world. And supermax facilities, as he's rightly said, they hold Richard Reed, they hold the underwear bomber Omar Abdul Farouk Muttalib, the Boston bomber, and many others. So they have, if any country's got the facility to to prosecute and convict terrorists. It's America, and the type of sentences that they hand out there sometimes are in hundreds of years, so there's no chance any of it's going to be released. The problem is that what about the folk in Guantanamo? Is there any evidence against them? After 14 years of being held by America, interrogated by the world's most powerful law enforcement and intelligence agencies, if you haven't got evidence to prosecute them by now, you never will. Doesn't matter where you take them, and I think that's the dilemma.
Moazzam Begg, thank you. British citizen, former inmate of Guantanamo Bay. It's 5:15.